Howdy, howdy, Chris here, and on today's episode of Garage Noise, I'm going to share with you everything you need to know to straighten the dent in this door. We're going to walk you through step by step the entire process and hopefully build your skill so you can tackle this repair on your own. So let's dig in and get started. So the first thing we want to do is evaluate the damage on this door, and this door has 3 dents. One on the top body line, one in the center, and then one on the bottom body line. So the first thing we want to do is remove the paint in the dented areas. So we're going to grind it down with the angle grinder and a 36 grit roll-lock disc and grind it down to bare metal. Today we're going to use a tool called the G90E, which is a tool that welds into the center of the dent, and then you can pull or slide hammer that dent out. Now, as we pull this dent out, we're going to tap down the crowns or the high areas around the dent. So when a dent is created, it's going to push in the center, and then it's going to raise the metal around that dent, creating a crown or a high area. Those need to be knocked down as you pull the dent out in order to get it level. The upper dent here is a shallow dent. It's not a real deep dent. In fact, it probably could just be filled, but I'm going to pull it out, tap down the crowns, get it back to level, and then we'll move on to the next dent. Here I'm pulling out a low area in the dent, and then I'm going to get my shrinking slapper and slap down any high areas to knock those flat. If I were just to knock down this crown with just the hammer, that's going to create dents, and I don't want that. I want it to be spread out evenly. So what I'm going to do is use my shrinking slapper, lay it on those crowns, and then hit it with the hammer, and that'll spread out that blow evenly across that panel. In general, this dent feels pretty good at this point, so we're going to move on to the center dent, and we'll start pulling that out with the G90E. There's a small sharp dent in the center of this damaged area. We're going to pull that out first, and then we'll address the crowns on the outside of the damage. I'm going to clean it up a little bit with my grinder, remove those weld marks so we can get a good clean weld on those low areas and pull those out. I'm going to continue to pull on this with the G90E, put some pressure on that metal, and use my slapper tool to knock down those high areas and level out that metal. I'm not quite getting the results I was looking for by pulling this dent out. This metal is just too thin and too flexible. So what I'm going to do is remove this door panel. I'm going to get Darius to hold a metal dolly behind that dent, and I'm going to use my slapper tool, my hammer, and dolly and straighten this metal the best I can. As I'm working this metal, you'll see me feel across the panel for any high or low areas that need to be addressed. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the lower trim so we can access this dent on the bottom of this door. So I went ahead and pulled out this dent in the bottom of this door with the G90E, used my hammer and dolly, and the same process as the other dents. Now we've got these dents pretty much ready for filler. Now I need to prepare these dents for filler, so I'm going to go ahead and use my orbital sander and some 80 grit sandpaper, and we're going to feather edge the paint back and prepare the outside area for some filler. I am going to be putting filler over the paint edge, so I need to make sure that's prepped properly for adhesion of the filler. An 80 grit sandpaper is going to do that. Before you lay the filler, you want to check over your repair area. Make sure there's not any high areas that are going to cause problems when you're trying to straighten this panel with filler. I'll use my pick hammer to tap down any high areas I find. Now we're ready to spread some filler, and the filler I'm using today is the Rage Ultra Filler. It's made by Evercoat, I believe. If you're curious or interested in any of the products or tools I use, check out my storefront. The link is in the description. The first coat of filler, we want to apply a little pressure, a medium amount of pressure to get it pressed in to any of those low areas. This will help make sure we're getting good adhesion to the metal, and it'll also help eliminate air pockets or pinholes in your filler. Now I'm going to rough sand this filler with my orbital sander. This is a Mirka sander. It oscillates. I'm going to use it in an X pattern. Even though it's oscillating, I'm still blocking it kind of in an X pattern, and that's going to help get it straight. But mainly what I'm doing is removing the excess filler that we don't need and smoothing it out for blocking. Now we're going to use our long block with some 80 grit sandpaper, and we're going to block this in an X pattern to get it straight. In most cases, you want to use a long block that's going to cover the complete surface of the body filler. Now, what I found when blocking this is that that block was just a little bit too long, and I'll tell you why. I was getting deep sand scratches outside my body filler, and I have a real small blend area on this door. So you want to keep in mind the whole process of the repair and what you're going to have to do when you paint it. So I don't want deep 80 grit scratches beyond that body filler. It's always good to keep your repair as small as possible. So there's a round contour at the bottom of this door, so I'm going to go ahead and use my round block to block that straight. It's always good to have a variety of different blocks when you're doing a repair. If you're finding this video helpful, now is a good time to tap that like button. Now we switched over to 180 grit sandpaper to block these panels straight. Basically, you want to use 80 grit to get it shaped and get it roughed in, and then you want to switch to a less aggressive sandpaper to block it straight. Through this entire blocking process, I'm going to constantly feel over this repair to make sure it's straight. I did notice some high and low areas, so we're going to use some icing. This is a polyester glaze that we're going to fill this top section, put a good coat over the entire top section, and then there's a couple little low areas in the center that we're going to fill, and then we'll block those out with some 220 or 180 grit sandpaper. I also want to put a thin coat of glaze right in that contour, so I have a little bit of material to block that and make a good transition from that upper repair down to that lower repair. Then I'll switch over to my round block. I'm going to use some 180 grit sandpaper to block those contours and get those flat and straight. And then we'll switch over to 320 and block this entire repair. You want to continually use less and less aggressive sandpaper until you're ready for primer. We want this to be all 320 grit scratches when we prime this. Once you have it all blocked out, you can sand the rest of the area around that repair. Any place that's been sanded and has scratches in it, we want to go over it with 320 and machine sand those coarse scratches out. So any 180 or 80 grit scratches that are left, we want to machine sand those out and get them smooth. And then I switch over to 600 grit sandpaper on my orbital sander, and we'll sand this entire area, the repair, the body filler, and then the whole door. Now I'm going to go ahead and mask this off for primer. I'm folding my paper over so I have a soft edge. I don't want a hard line of primer that's hard to sand out, and it could affect your repair. So we're going to put one coat of 2K urethane primer over this. The primer I'm using today is the Roberlo ME1. That is a good sandable primer. It is a direct to metal primer, and like I said, any tools or products I use, you can find them and the link to my storefront in the description. And I am using the 3M gun with a 1.3 tip. And if you haven't checked out the review and demo on this gun, check it out. I'll leave a link at the end. So I'm going to put a little heat on this. This is a curing lamp that I use, and that's going to help it to cure just a little bit quicker. We went ahead and put a guide coat over this, and this helps in the blocking process. The guide coat is going to show us any high or low areas that we need to block or add primer to. So we're going to block this in an X pattern, and then as we block this, we're going to be blocking down that guide coat until it's entirely gone and smooth. Now, the guide coat is going to show you the texture of the primer and the texture of your repair. It'll also show you those high or low areas. So here you can see the guide coat at work. Those black areas are those are low areas. So I'm going to continue blocking on those until I've either removed that guide coat. Now I know that panel is relatively straight, or if I break through into body filler or bare metal, then I need to address that. So if I break into body filler, I'll just need to put another coat of primer over it. If I hit bare metal, I may have a high area that needs to be knocked down. Now that our blocking is done and this panel is straight, I'm going to use my orbital sander, some 600 grit sandpaper, and machine sand this entire panel. I am using an interface pad, which is a soft pad that helps that DA to contour to those curves of that panel. Now I'm going to do a final coat of primer. Now this primer is the ME1 and I've reduced it 15%. I just want a thin coat of primer over this, so when I go to prep this out for paint, it's just going to be an easy sand of 600 and it'll be ready. If you want to learn how to finish this repair, click on this video now and I'll show you how to paint. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. We'll see you next time on Garage Noise.